Okay, so you all probably heard that next week, Monday, April 8th, is a special day because there's a solar eclipse. And solar eclipse,
Kicking 28 years?
no, that's something else. Solar eclipse also comes very rarely. It comes very rarely, especially at the same place. It comes about 200 to 400 years in the same area. So the fact that we are seeing it the second time within about 10 years, or 8 years, I think the last one was in 17. So it's a very, very rare occasion to see it so close by. So that's what we want to speak about. Is it a good sign or is not a good sign? But we have a machloket over here already in the Chachmei HaKolel. But we'll try to see what the Torah tells us and see if we mechaven. So in Sefer Bereshit, you all heard of Sefer Bereshit, I hope. It says about the meorot. Vayomer Elokim, yi meorot berki hashamayim. There were two meorot. Meor, one meor is a meor gadol, which is the Chama, the sun, and a meor katan, a katon, לממשלת הלילה ותכוכבים. So a meor katon is the levana. Vayu leotot, says the pasuk. Leotot. What does it mean leotot? Rashi says, כשהמאורות לוקים, when the luminaries get likui, which means what we're going to see now, and that is the eclipse. Lokim, they get hit, they get, they're not being seen at their full version. Siman ra'u la'olam. It's a bad sign to the world. The Rashi brings a pasuk, שנאמר, מוטות השמיים אל תחתו, בסותכם רצון הקדוש ברוך הוא אין אתם צריכים לדאוג מן הפורענות. Which means when there is meorot, there is puranut. Just there's ways to protect ourselves from the puranut, and that is to do Ritzon Hashem. But a puranut comes to the world when there is an eclipse. That's what Rashi tells us. But Rashi takes this from the Gemara, and let's see how the Gemara learns this, and see that things are not as simple as it seems on the surface. So in the Gemara, there's three opinions what happens when there is an eclipse. But before we see what happened when there is an eclipse, I like to point out the end of the Gemara, and the Gemara says, Tanu Rabbanan b'shel arba'a dvarim chama loka. There is an eclipse, there is a likui chama, for four different reasons. Al av bet din shemet, ve'eno nispat ke'alacha, על נערה מורסה שצעקה בעיר ואין מושיע לה, על משכב זכור ועל שני אחים שנשפך דמן כאחד. ובשביל ארבעה דברים מאורות לוקין, and so on and so forth. But whatever it is, the mefarshim, many of the mefarshim ask over here an obvious question, that likui chama is something that's in nature. You can predict, you can know when is the next likui chama at a certain location, at a given location, a given time and a given location. So how could it be happening because of certain sin? It's a natural event. It's a natural phenomenon. Just like, for instance, when we're dealing about a rainbow. A rainbow also. The Torah says that the rainbow comes because the Kadosh Baruch Hu is angry at the time. And he wants to flood the world. But he made a treaty with the world that whenever he wants to flood the world is sinning so bad. As the time of Noach, so afterwards he made a treaty with the world that is not flooding the world anymore, once again, and therefore, just as a reminder to that treaty, he brings out a rainbow. But everybody knows that a rainbow comes when there is droplets in the air, in the atmosphere, after rain or after dew, and the sun rays shine through them, and that creates a rainbow. If you go to certain places in the world, there's always rainbows. For instance, I've been to the Iguazu, one of the most beautiful places in the world. Iguazu are falls in Brazil. So if you think the Niagara Falls is nice, Niagara Falls is just a tiny little fall in compared to many, many falls that are much greater, much bigger, much more beautiful. Everything is so much nicer over there than that little Niagara Falls. Just to give you a perspective, it's a gorgeous thing if anybody wants to ever go. So, but you always see rainbows there. By the way, on such a rainbow, the poskim say you don't say the bracha, because it's not a rainbow that indicates what we're saying right now. Only a rainbow that comes from rain. But if it's rainbow that comes from,
Niagara Falls also there is one over.
Right.
That's called the Rainbow Bridge.
Right. For the same reason, because when you go to Niagara Falls, there's always droplets in the air. Everything is wet. You walk it by the boardwalk, everything is wet there. Why is it wet? Because the fall itself, when it hits the water, everything flies out, and then the sun rays shine through them and causes a rainbow. So mimele, how could the Torah says it's because of the treaty Hashem made? So there's few answers in the poskim. So I want to say concerning our Gemara over here that it comes because of different sins. Some want to say that what we're talking about, the eclipse, is rather not the regular eclipse that we're experiencing normally, but rather it's not that when the sun is covered by the moon or so, but rather when the sun itself gets a certain spot in it, or when the moon itself gets a certain spot in it, it makes the sun or the moon, it changes the sun or the moon. All of a sudden you see the moon itself with a black mark in it or something like that. That is what we're talking about. This is the Arot Dvash. Others want to explain a little bit differently, which is nice, and that is that whenever you have meorot, likui meorot, wherever you have an eclipse, whether it's lunar eclipse or solar eclipse, so then the mekatregim have an opportunity to be mekatreg. Just like the Gemara says in Shabbat Lamed Aleph, Nafal Torah Chadet Sakina. What does it mean? The shochatim, when they see that the ox falls, they say it's an opportunity. Normally, you try to hold the ox and make it fall, and it's a hard job. But if it falls by itself, now it's an opportunity. Right away, sharpen the knife and let's shech the ox. Nafal Torah Chadet Sakina. That's a Gemara that deals with what the Mishnah says, that we say every Erev Shabbat, that at the time of labor, the woman is being judged. Why is it that she could, chas v'shalom, get punished at the time of labor for different things, for chala, nida, and the Rot Shabbat? Why is it that she's being judged dafka at that time? So that's what the Gemara says, because at that time she's vulnerable. When somebody's vulnerable, then the mekatregim come and they try to get their way. Same thing is here. When the world is covered now, so it's an opportunity, spiritual opportunity. Obviously, everything we're talking is spiritual, natural. In natural events, nothing happens in the world. Maybe it gets at those places dark and a little bit colder for a few minutes, but nothing actually happens. But in the spiritual world, it means a certain darkness in the world, spiritual darkness, and then it's an opportunity for the Mekatregim to be Mekatregim. So that gives a little bit understanding. But I want to concentrate on what the Maharal Miprag says in Be'er HaGolah, and he speaks beautifully.
So the Pshat in the Gemara is that Hashem does it in order to deal with this type of things, because it's happening naturally.
No, it happens naturally. Hashem doesn't do it. Hashem does everything. But why did he set certain dates that you can predict and know that will happen then. But you should know that at that time, all the sins come to the table. Just like, for instance, in Rosh Hashanah.
So because of this, it should be for it. Pshat will be for it, not because of.
Not because of it, right? Just at that time, the sins are being, just like in Rosh Hashanah, you're being judged. So it's not Rosh Hashanah is
So the Tema will be for what purpose? Not
that at that time the sin are being emphasized. It's like putchim et pinkaso.
Just those four things.
Well, there's another list over here, but whatever it is, that's the idea. But I like to take you to the Maharal Miprag in Be'er Shishi, in Be'er Agola, he says a beautiful pshat, and he says the following, I'm reading. לא באו חכמים לדבר מן הסיבה הטבעית כקטון ופחות הסיבה הטבעית. כי דבר זה ייעוט לחכמי הטבע או לרופאים ולא, או לרופאים לא לחכמים. Which means like this. When Chazal speak, there's a lot of questions that you can see in the Gemara. The Gemara speaks about many different places, things that don't fit correctly what the science have found to be facts. There's certain things that are facts. And when you take a look at the Gemara says things that are different. And you don't understand. How did Chazal say things that we know today, they're not like that? The answer is what the Maharal says over here. When Chachamim spoke, they didn't speak about natural events. It's beneath them to speak about natural events. Why this happens naturally. That's good for the scientists, for the doctors. Let them deal with it. It's something physical, something that you can find just by searching in the world as scientists do. That's not what Chachamim, that's not what Chazal dealt with. Rather, אבל הם ז"ל דיברו מן הסיבה שמחייב הטבע. They spoke about the reason behind what causes the nature to work that way. And he goes on and on to explain that חכמי הטבע נתנו סיבה טבעית לקשת כמו שידוע מדבריהם. When we speak about the rainbow, you want to know what's the reason for a rainbow naturally? Physical reason? That's what the scientists spoke about. It's the rays, it's the droplets in the air, it connects together, it creates a rainbow. אבל הדבר הוא כך, שהסיבה אשר נתנה התורה הוא הסיבה, שלכל דבר סיבה טבעית מחייב אותו, ועל אותה סיבה טבעית של סיבה אלוקית, והוא סיבת הסיבה. ומזה דיברו חכמים. Beautiful words, which means like this. What Chachamim told us are the spiritual reasons that caused the nature to act the way they do. Why things happen naturally? Why did the droplets come exactly at that time together with the rays? HaKadosh Baruch Hu made that happen because of a spiritual reason. And same thing he explains here, and he goes in length, the Be'er Agola, to explain our Gemara as well that way. Which means, I'm reading, this is already Be'er Agola, Be'er Shishi, Perek Bet. He says, in Sukkah, Adal Dvarim Chama Loka, and he brings all that, and he speaks about it. He says, איך אפשר לומר שהלקות המאורות תלוי בדברים כאלו שהאדם יודע זמן הלקות? You know exactly when the eclipse will happen. So how can you say it's because of those sins that the Gemara lists over here? Shem al pi chashbon, you can make the calculation. You know exactly when is the next eclipse, exactly on time and where in the world it would happen. How could you connect that to the sins? וגם דבר זה הוא טעות. שאין דין דרך חכמים להסיר הסיבה הקרובה, שוודאי תלוי לקות המאורות במהלך המאורות. Of course, naturally, that's what it is. Chachamim didn't speak about that. They knew that, but that was something physical that they didn't deal with. It was beneath them. אבל סיבת הסיבה נתנו הם. כי אם לא היה החטא בעולם, לא היה דבר זה. כי אין ספק שלקות המאורות הוא פחיתות גדול וחיסרון בעולם. ואם לא היה החטא, נמצא בעולם, לא היה סדר, הבריאה נותן שיהיה לקות המאורות. Which means like this. Even though you don't know that in another 20 years from now, when the eclipse will happen, then there'll be sins of those that are listed in the Gemara. But what I think the understanding here is that those sins, as long as they're not fixed, they're not being taken care of, they always can come about at certain times. It's just like a person that has, for instance, a pain in a certain part of his body, and he knows that whenever something happened, that brings it about. All of a sudden, he feels that pain. I was giving a mashal to that. There's many people that feel back pain when it rains. So they don't need to go out to the window in the morning and know that now it's raining. Why? They have a back pain. You know such a thing? It's an interesting phenomenon. That, it's a myth, you're saying? Whatever it is. But for the mashal, it's a good thing.
But the deal of Amasa, your knees are telling you when it's raining. And humidity, your knees hurt. You guys are too young.
Oh, okay. So we have confirmation that. So what's pshat? What pshat? The rain brings the pain. The pain is there all the time. It's like a virus that a person has. Once in a while, when he's stressed, virus doesn't go away. When a person has virus, it's within him forever. It's not like when you have a bacteria. You treat it with antibiotic and it's gone. Virus. So you able to conquer that virus, but once in a while, a person it could come back. So when is it? Some people have certain symptoms that bring them back. Okay, so same thing here. As long as you didn't fix it, the symptoms are bringing back that problem again and again when there is a likui. Now, of course, according to that, if it's taken care of, if people don't do those sins anymore, Kadosh Baruch Hu then will do something that the likui chama will not happen. Or that's what Chachamim tell us, that when don't you have to worry from likui chama? When Am Yisrael does Ratzon Hashem. That's what Rashi brought, and that's what the Gemara brings over here. Okay, let's take the understanding of what happens when there is likui chama. So Rashi told us that it's a bad siman, it's a bad sign for the world. But there's three opinions in the Gemara, and let's read inside. The Gemara says, Tanu Rabbanan, Bizman shechama loka siman ra lechol ha'olam kulo. The first opinion in the Gemara is that it's a bad sign for, this is Gemara in Sukkah Kaftet. It's a bad sign for the entire world. משל למה הדבר דומה? למלך בשר ודם שעושה סעודה לעבדיו. Let's say a king make a סעודה for his servants, and he puts over there a lamp in order to shine for them so they can eat. When he gets angry, he takes away the lamp. All of a sudden, it becomes dark. So that's exactly what happens here. It's a sign that the entire world is in trouble. It's siman ra la'olam. That's the first opinion. That is Tanu Rabbanan. That's his Chachamim. Then you have the opinion of Rabbi Meir. Tanya Rabbi Meir אומר, כל זמן שמאורות לוקים, סימן רע לשונאיהם של ישראל. It's a bad sign for Am Yisrael. Why? Why Am Yisrael over everybody else? Says Rabbi Meir, מפני שמלומדים במכותיהם. Because they are the one usually getting lashes. They're getting usually hit. They usually get all the trouble in the world. משל לסופר שבא לבית הספר, ורצועה בידו. A teacher comes to the principal comes into the class, and he has a belt in his hand. Who's afraid? מי דואג? מי שרגיל ללקות בכל יום ויום. Normally, there's one kid that he's the one that gets usually always. So he's the one, even if he didn't make any trouble, he's the one that would be afraid right now, right? In Hebrew, it's called Nar Hakafot, which means you always have this kid that always gets bullied. Why? Your tracks is more vulnerable, is more soft. Usually, he's the one that gets hit. The tough ones, so it's not natural. It's not necessarily those that are troublemakers. I mean, take a look, because that's exactly the mashal. The nimshal is Am Yisrael, right? The nimshal is Am Yisrael. Am Yisrael are always the bullied, right? Anything that happens bad in the world, who did it? The Jews, right? The Jews, it's the Jews. All kind of crazy things, it's always to blame the Jews. So, that is Rabbeinu opinion. It seems like he's arguing on Tanu Rabbanan that says that the entire world are okay. It's a bad sign for the entire world. Rameir says, no, it's only for Israel. And then the third opinion is again Tanu Rabbanan, בזמן שהחמה לוקה סימן רע לעובדי כוכבים. When the sun is covered, the solar eclipse, the sun is covered. It's a siman ra לעובדי כוכבים, for the goyim, because they are the one that the sun resembles of the kochavim normally. They count to the sun, and they are the one that compared to the sun. Levana, which is compared to Am Yisrael, because Am Yisrael also counts to the sun, and also there's different reasons why Am Yisrael always compared to the sun, either because Am Yisrael are mitchadesh, just like the Levana is mitchadesh, every month it comes again. It renews itself, so does Am Yisrael renews itself all the time. Am Yisrael continuously fall and come back. they get hit, they come back to the front stage, and so on and so forth. Also, another mashal that you could say is that the Chama is very large and the Levana is very small, just like the Umot HaOlam are many and Am Yisrael are very few. So whenever the Levana is loka, when you have the lunar eclipse, Siman Ra lesoneim shel Israel. It's coming to show that it's a bad sign for Am Yisrael. מפני שישראל מונים ללבנה ועובדי כוכבים לחמה. Okay? But not necessarily that you could learn that it's a machloket, but rather over here it seems like you could learn that it's just the build-up. The first opinion just said whenever you have an eclipse, the entire world, it's a bad sign for the entire world. And then Rav Meir says this is more of a worry to Am Yisrael. This is how Rashi also says. He says, "Mipnei shemelumadim b'makoteim." This is how Rav Meir explains that Am Yisrael has to worry, but not only Am Yisrael, because Rashi says שיש להם לישראל לדאוג ולומר לא בסימן זה אלא בשבילנו יותר משאר האומות. מפני שהם רגילים ללקוט יותר מכולם, which means Am Yisrael has to be more worried than others, but it's a siman רק to the entire world, which means Rav Meir is not arguing necessarily on Tanu Rabbanan, but rather is saying an extra point. He says that yes, it's a bad sign for the entire world, but Am Yisrael are to be worried more than others, because Am Yisrael are more likely to get hit than others. And then the Tanu Rabbanan, the last opinion, comes to say that 1 minute, it also depends which eclipse it is. If it's the sun that's being covered, that's more of a problem for the Umot HaOlam. If it's the moon that's covered, it's more of a problem, more of a worry to Am Yisrael. Now, if you think about it, it comes out to be something very interesting. Let's just think about what happens in the solar eclipse and what happens in a lunar eclipse. In the solar eclipse, what happens? And that's what will happen next week, Monday. You have the sun there's three players here. You have the earth, the sun, and the moon. That's what it is. And at that point, on those hours, it's going to travel from Mexico. This eclipse travel from Mexico, U.S., come around the area of Buffalo and other places, and go all the way to Canada. So that line will be a total eclipse. What happens then? The moon is situated exactly between the sun and the earth. So it covers, the moon is very little compared to the sun, but it's situated exactly between the line of the sun and the earth, and therefore when you take a look from the earth, you try to take a look and find the sun, it's covered. That's what happens. If you try to think according to what we explained right now, that everything is meant to be everything is a spiritual reason, and not only spiritual reason, the sun represents the world, the nations, and the moon represents Am Yisrael, comes out to be something very interesting. That at that very moment, it seems like Am Yisrael, why is it a bad sign for the nations? Because Am Yisrael are able at that very moment to take over, to cover the world from the nations. It's able to cover the world itself from the sun that represents the nation. Am Yisrael are being able to be victorious at that very time. It's very, very interesting. Unlike the lunar eclipse, which represents the Am Yisrael, has Siman Ra le'Am Yisrael, bad sign for Am Yisrael. What happens then? The moon is the other side of the world. So you have the world in between the sun and the moon. So when you are there, you can't see the moon, because you are exactly at a place that when the sun shines, the moon itself is a mirror. It can't find this moon at any place because it's exactly on the other side and it's covered completely by the earth. If that is the case, who covers the entire moon that represents Am Yisrael? The world. The world itself, the earthly things, the physical things. When Am Yisrael are involved so much in physical things, the physical of the world can cover Am Yisrael, which is the moon, and that is a bad sign for Am Yisrael. So it could be that is the understanding of that Gemara. If you try to explain it the way we did right now, you'll find very interesting psukim and Zohar that really fit nicely into this understanding. And that is what will happen in the end of days when Mashiach comes. Now, as I told you, this eclipse is not something that comes very often.
It's going to be
And-
visible in Israel, the eclipse?
No.
As a law?
Yeah, it's here. It's here. The line is here. The line comes through here. So, in Yoel, the Navi speaks about Acharit Hayamim. The Navi speaks about Acharit Hayamim, Perek Gimel. It says over here in the Radak, for instance, Vaya b'Acharit Hayamim. Vaya achre chen, Radak says, Kmo vaya b'Acharit Hayamim. And this is how the Mefarshim explain over here that the Nevuah of Yoel over here, Yoel HaNavi, is for Acharit Hayamim. So what does it say? It says like this, Vaya achre chen, Eshpoch et ruchi al kol basar, v'nivu b'nechem. There's a prophecy here in Pasuk Gimel. It says, "V'natati moftim b'shamayim u'va'aretz." I will make signs in the sky and in the earth, which means signs that will affect the sun and the earth. That's exactly what we're talking about when we're talking about an eclipse, because it darkens the entire world. What kind of muftim? Dam ve'esh v'timrot ashan. And he explains openly, says the next pasuk, pasuk daled, "Hashemesh yafech lechoshech." The sun will become dark. Vayareach ledam. The moon will become bloody, red. That's exactly what happens in a solar eclipse. The sun becomes completely dark, and the moon becomes red. That's exactly what happens. Lifnei bo yom Hashem agadol ve'anora. Before Hashem appears, before Mashiach comes, before Hashem appears to the world, what happens? Hashem yafech lechoshech ve'yareach ledam. So that comes out, Bezrat Hashem, to be that nevuah exactly happens. But is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? So the way we explained right now, it depends what happens exactly. If it's a solar eclipse, it's a bad sign for Umot Olam, not for Am Yisrael. For Am Yisrael, it could be a good sign, because the Gemara says, Amaleach hareva. When Am Yisrael are on top, then Umot Olam are on the bottom. When Am Yisrael are on the bottom, then Umot Olam are on top. That's the way it is. It's not, Im Amar Lecha, that,
You say for the last shot, not for me and not for...
So let me tell you about the Zohar in Parashat Ki Tetzeh. No, so but we explained that last pshat not necessarily is arguing, and even if it is arguing, the Tanu Rabbanan is the last opinion. Last opinion normally it's Tanu Rabbanan. It's arguing on Rav Meir. So when you have Chachamim and Rav Meir, Halacha is a Chachamim, Rabim v'Yachid Halacha. But this is not le'alacha. This whole thing. I think it's a build-up over here. Whatever it is, that's how it sounds like from the Gemara. Now, let me tell you a Zohar, unbelievable Zohar in Parashat Ki Tetzeh. I saw it today, unbelievable. The Zohar says the following, that not only Am Yisrael are counting to the moon, but also the Ishmaelim count to the moon. The Gemara says that Am Yisrael count to the moon, and Umot HaOlam count to the sun. But the Zohar says, not all the Umot HaOlam. We're talking about Christians. They count their months according to the sun, the months according to the sun. Am Yisrael counts their month according to the moon. But not only Am Yisrael, but also the Ishmaelim count to the moon. That's what the Zohar says.
They're only to the moon. We at least do leap year. They don't even do leap year.
So the Zohar says, לחכות לך הרב כרמי, זה אתה מפסיד פה את העיקר. So the Zohar says that the moon really sometimes could be good and sometimes represent bad. When do you know if it's good or if it's bad? The Zohar says the following thing. Sometimes it's good for Am Yisrael, sometimes it's bad for Am Yisrael. Sometimes it's good for the Ishmaelim, sometimes it's bad for the Ishmaelim. When do you know if it's good or bad? It says the Zohar, when the moon is whole, is full, when you have a full moon, and that is when you have likui. That is when you have an eclipse. Whether it is a solar eclipse or lunar eclipse, doesn't matter. But at the time that the moon is whole, is full, so then it's a bad sign for Am Yisrael. But when the moon is not whole, then it's a bad sign for the Ishmaelim. Now, when is this eclipse happening this time? At the end of the month, mamash at the end of Chodesh Adar. Total Chodesh, end of Chodesh Adar. What happens at the end of the Chodesh of the month? There's no moon at all. There's Gornish, no moon at all. Now, you wouldn't say, if it would be in the beginning of the month, maybe it's a new creation, maybe it's a good sign, it's starting, something starting, just like Am Yisrael is, the Levana is starting, just like the Bach says that the woman is compared to the Levana because she's mitchadeshet every month. That's why she has the holiday of Rosh Chodesh. It's a holiday of the women. That's why they don't do melacha on Rosh Chodesh and so on. But when we're talking about the end of the month, that's definitely, it's the end, it's the destruction, it's the final stage, it's everything gone, it's the total end. And that is when the Zohar says if the moon is not whole, it's missing. But what about if the whole thing is missing? That's a total destruction, that is when it's a bad sign for the Ishmaelim, says the Zohar. So according to that, comes out beautiful, that you have a sign, a siman, that there's a likui chama, which is bad for umot haolam. But which kind of likui chama? Likui chama in a time that the moon is not there, which is a bad sign for the Ishmaelim. And when is it happening? It's happening exactly, hopefully, that already we don't know, but we hope that it's happening exactly at the time that the Nevuah of Yoel is coming to tell us, because all the signs show that, the world is not going to survive another eclipse. I don't think so. Like, you're holding already by the end of days. How could you get worse than that? So, if that is true, you have over here a siman that, how the pasuk says, והיה כל אשר יקרא בשם השם ימלט, כי בהר ציון ובירושלים תהיה פלטה, כאשר אמר השם ובשרידים אשר השם קורא. And before then we said that all that השמש יהפך לחושך, הירח לדם, לפני בוא יום השם הגדול והנורא. So בעזרת השם, we should all experience that very Nevuah of Yoel, that we should see the Mashiach come and we see the destruction of all our enemies, Be'ezrat Hashem. It should happen Monday. And if not Monday, at least right after, because it doesn't say that it's going to happen Monday. It's Lifnei Bo Yom Hashem. When is Lifnei Bo Hashem? Before. How long before? Hopefully very, not too long before.